You know, there's a lot of great NES titles, but it manages to surprise me how many classic games just get so easily overlooked. Games like Rockin' Cats and Crystallis are just as worthy as the Mega Mans and the Zeldas. But there's one game in particular that you may have heard of, but probably never played. And that game? The Jetsons Cogswell Caper on NES. Now I know how awesome this gem is, but do you?
Ladies and gentlemen, one of the great forgotten NES classics. While understandably underrated in its time, this is a gem that now deserves more praise. It's not perfect, but for all the mistakes made, a great number of things were done so well that if you truly fancy yourself a retro gamer, you should be able to overlook them. Giving this game the time it deserves to master its gameplay, you will be rewarded with one of the most solid gaming experiences on the console. Yeah, it's that good. Developed by Natsume, who at the time were known for Shatterhand as well as the Power Blade games, it was also published by Taito as late as December of 1992. By this point, Taito and Natsume had the NES on lockdown. While most developers had moved on in favor of the superior hardware, like the Super Nintendo, these guys stayed behind to release some of the all-time underrated NES games, like Kickmaster and what most see as the Holy Trilogy, Bubble Bobble Part 2, Panic Restaurant, and the highly regarded Little Samson. Like these, I believe Jetsons deserves a spotlight for being a great underrated title. None of those games really did that well, however, and they are now some of the rarest and most collectible titles for the system. It's a shame that even to this day, this game is either panned or given mediocre scores across the board by those who even bother to look into it. The Jetsons Cogswell Caper is a side-scrolling platformer with elements of action that resemble Chip and Dale's Rescue Rangers, with mechanics of picking up and throwing boxes. Boxes are generally plentiful, but need to be used strategically with precision timing to be effective. Boxes can be thrown left, right, straight up, or diagonally up in either direction. Getting down the arc and the timing of the boxes leads to some challenging but satisfying combat. The tough part is that enemies have a lot of variation in their attack patterns, which needs to be practiced multiple times and eventually mastered. The bosses at the end of each main stage are really neat as well, each being an interesting and memorable experience, albeit a challenging one. While most just take a bunch of hits with the boxes, it's fun to figure out the timing while tensely dodging their attacks. Enemies in general have a unique flair to them, and they fit their stages nicely. While enemies can be challenging, each attack only ever takes away one heart from your life bar. Along the way, you'll pick up small hearts, which replenish one heart, big hearts, which give you an additional hit, and stars, which when 10 are collected, give you an extra life. You can have a max of 5 hits, and you lose one every time you die until you're back to 3. You'll also obtain tiny pills called power packs, which serve as your ammo for a variety of weapons. Most weapons are given to you after a boss or after a short stage by key characters of the show, which is nice to see that they make an appearance. My favorite is the remote control, which summons a tiny option-looking robot to damage the closest enemy, which is very helpful and only takes 5 pills. There's also magnetic boots that allow you to stick to the ceiling like certain switches do in other parts of the game at the cost of a pill per second. It's kind of like the gravity gimmick in Metal Storm, or from Gravity Man's stage in Mega Man 5. This can be handy when trying to dodge enemies or just trying to get hard to reach items. The rest, like the shield, flashlight, and hoverboard, are good ideas, but are mostly situational, and I barely use them due to obtaining them so late in the game. The atmosphere is beyond awesome. Like I said, Natsume and Taito had a comprehensive understanding of the hardware by this point, and it really shows. The graphics are great, with the highlight being the plethora of animations on every single character in motion, which is impressive for an NES title, especially considering how many models there were for each enemy, which had a few animations each. Not only that, but given the fact that it's based on a popular TV show, it seems kind of essential that the animation would be top-notch. The stages all look great too. I'm not too familiar with the show, but I'd wager to say they captured the world's theming of a wacky future pretty darn well. Regardless of the license, the 12 levels are colorful and unique. No two feel the same. There's factories, gardens, gyms, stadiums, a land of dreams, a blast furnace, and it's all set to the space background when outside, giving the game a distinct cosmic feel, which few games of its time could really capture. And my god, can we get some love for the music? The soundtrack here is brilliant, and some of the single most underrated video game music of all time. The score was composed by Iku Mitsutani, who scored other Natsume titles including Shatterhand, and Kazuko Umino of the band Zuntata, who are most well known for doing the music to Ninja Warriors. The 3 factory themes are endlessly enjoyable, while all of the other tracks do a great job of not only theming their stages, but also just being damn fine music for standalone listening. Give it a listen sometime here on YouTube. I'll put a link in the description. It's totally worth it. To be quite honest though, this game really didn't appeal to me at first. Its tough difficulty curve and lack of a password system or save feature are its minor but only downfalls in my opinion. Unlimited Continues is a cheap but welcome way to make up for this. It's another time you'll just have to leave your NES running until you beat it. This game also suffers from the flaw of not being able to scroll backwards, meaning once an item leaves the screen, you cannot go back for it. The game is built around this though, so it's not a huge issue. The boss of Cosmic World also pissed me off because the game doesn't give you boxes like it does in the other stages. Instead, you have to use a remote bot, which is fine, but that means getting every pill on the stage, dying before the boss on all of your extra lives, getting enough stars to gain another extra life, and doing the stage perfect for a 4th time to fight the boss with at least 60 pills in order to win. None of the other stages are like that, and it's not a difficult stage, so again, this is a minor complaint. While some parts feel hard, they never feel impossible, and I always felt like I could do it once I figured out how and mastered the patterns. There are some cheap deaths, but if games like Castlevania, Ninja Gaiden, and Kid Icarus can all be considered classic with their brutal difficulty and cheap deaths, then I'd argue that old school gamers can look past these flaws in this title. The cart is going to set you back a bit, about $100, due to it being pretty darn rare. But my argument has always been if you're a collector who's going to get it eventually, you might as well get it as soon as possible. Mine was $90 a year ago, and that only proves that it's going up in value. And there's always no shame in emulating a rare game. If you use a retro adapter with a real NES controller, I'd argue it's about 95% on par with the real experience. That is, if you don't abuse save states. Emulators are what sparked my love for these old consoles in the first place, so if that's your thing, go for it. My point is that reviewers in general never gave this game the time it needs to grow on them by mastering the controls and stages, probably due to the bias of it being a licensed game or that the NES had a lot of generic platforms. But if you look past these minor flaws, you might enjoy or maybe even love what's here. Incredible music and inventive levels, coupled with some fun items and intense combat, makes this a really solid NES title, which is criminally underlooked to this day. At the time of this review, the only videos on YouTube are gameplay. There's only one fact, and most reviews or comments I've seen give this game low marks, possibly due to the price, which is rather sad.
This truly is a great title, and hopefully this review does something to give it a little more recognition. Now, it's just as classic as the likes of Castlevania and Mega Man in my opinion, so I'm proud to award it an 8.6 out of 10. It's a truly must-play for the NES, but I recommend it mostly to collectors, unless you don't mind emulating. So anyways, this has been JZNES. Thanks for watching, and stick around for more reviews and underrated games. Keep it classic, and I'll see you next time.